Hey guys, welcome back. It's me, Beans. Welcome back to my podcast. Um, so today there's been a lot going on, right, in the world and life. Things have been super chaotic and stressful. And I think I want to put a little bit of importance on making sure you're okay, making sure that you are taking care of yourself, taking care of your needs, um, and just doing what you can for you in this crazy time. But today's video is going to be about protection, right? I've been hearing a lot about protection recently, and so I thought I'd make a video about protection, the different types of protection, why we might need to do protection, some of the signs that you might need protection. So this one might be just a little bit long. We'll see. Sometimes I'm like, right. It's going to be a long one, not a long one. So we will see how this one goes, where it takes us, how that all happens. But let's jump into it, guys. Welcome back to Spill the Beans podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Let's get into it. One of the things that I want to emphasize, right, is sometimes people are like, well, why do you need protection, right? Because when we get into spirituality, when we get into witchcraft, right, a lot of people think that it's evil or harmful or all of that type of stuff, working with the devil and stuff. And they're like, well, if it's not that, then why do you even need protection, right? And it's not that. Some of the reasons why you need protection is, number one, when you become more aware of energy, when you become more aware of the things that are around you, how people maneuver energetically, you become a little bit more sensitive, right? And sometimes it's not even that, like, okay, people are sending you bad energy or negative energy. It's the energy that is around is more heightened. You're more sensitive to it. You feel it more deeply, and you want to protect yourself from feeling it that deeply, because it can be a lot. It can be draining. It can be exhausting. So that is one of the reasons why you might want protection. Another reason is because there are a lot of energy vampires out there, right? There are people who are going to suck and siphon and just take your energy, and that is just so draining that it leaves you so exhausted, and sometimes you want to protect yourself from that, right? There are other people who they have the excess energy and they're like, okay, I don't mind a little bit of draining, I don't mind a little bit of a siphoning, that's okay. But most people, they don't want that. They don't want to be around someone who constantly is taking. So there is that as well. And then when you get into spirituality, people are more aware of you. And sometimes people, they get jealous, they get envious. Sometimes they deliberately send you negative energy. And other times it's on accident, right? Sometimes they're just envious, they're just jealous, and sometimes they accidentally send you negative energy. And that happens when you're not spiritual. That happens when you're not into witchcraft. People send people negative energy, bad juju, the evil eye on accident all the time. So there may be times when you want to protect yourself against that. There are times where you're like, you know what, I just want to protect my house, right? I just want to protect my house. I want to protect the people in my house. It's very common to want to protect the people who you care about and love, okay? If you're going on a journey, you might want to protect yourself while you're going on said journey. It doesn't hurt to have extra protection. You can protect yourself from illnesses, you can protect yourself from harm, you can protect yourself from plagues, you know? You can try and protect yourself from weather. I've heard that there are some people who've had some good outcomes with that. I myself have never personally tried it, but you can try and do that. So there are a plethora of different reasons why someone may want to protect themselves. You may also want to protect yourself from spying energy. Sometimes people, especially people who are spiritual, but sometimes people who are not spiritual, they will want to spy on you for evil purposes, to try and take your success, to steal your happiness. And so they'll try and peek into your energy and peek into what you're doing. And you can absolutely block and protect yourself from that. So keep that in mind when you're out here like, why would I do protection? You may want to just keep people out of your business. You may just want to keep people out of your space, and that's perfectly valid and that's perfectly okay too. Something that's important to note before doing spell work, any spell work, protection or otherwise, is you want to make sure that you're in a good place. You want to make sure that mentally you're okay, you're grounded, you're centered. Sometimes you need to take a moment and decompress before you start spell work, you know? I would always stay clean before you do any spell work as well. And for protection, protection works great when it's as specific as possible. Spell work in general works great when it's as specific as possible, okay? So, you could be like, okay, I'm gonna do a spell just to protect my house. I'm gonna do another spell just to protect me. I'm gonna do another spell just to protect my friends and family. It's okay to do multiple protection spells. In fact, I encourage it. I encourage people to have multiple layers of protection at all points in time, not because there's some big evil bad, but because spell work works best when it's specific, right? So you might have multiple different workings for specific different things, you know, one from illness, one from prying energy, one to protect your name. So, and that's okay. I encourage it. I think that's the best way to go about it, because ultimately, if one of those fails, you end up having a backup layer. Maybe not a super strong backup layer, but you have a backup layer and you're still protected. So if something slips through, it doesn't slip through as hard or as impactful as it might have been if you didn't have all those protection layers there. So, but also, it's important to keep in mind you don't want to keep yourself overly protected to where you keep out all of the good as well as the bad, you know? So there is a little bit of give and take there, you know? So you got to be mindful of that. But I do encourage people to have multiple layers of protection just because I think that's the best way to go about it. And as with all spell work, protections need to be upkept, right? You are probably going to have to redo them. You're going to have to rework them, recharge them, you know? And that's normal. That's what most people do. So expect to have to recharge, redo, rework them, light another candle, say another prayer, do another offering. When you do that just depends, right? You could do it on a like routinely basis, like, oh, okay, I do this every month on the full moon, on the new moon, that's fine. Summer solstice, winter solstice, that's good too. Or you could do it like every day. It's a lot to do every day, but I do think um, making sure you have some sort of protections in the daily, especially if you work in an environment where you're around a lot of people, making sure that you have some sort of protections around those people can be helpful. They may not need to be done every day, but depending on how those people interact with you, some people it's like the energy is heavy. It does need to be done every day, right? Or you could do them weekly, bi-weekly. It just depends. It depends on how much negativity, how much your wards or protection is getting beat up. That depends on when you need to redo them and how often. You know, sometimes you do a protection and really nothing's coming through your protection. So no one's trying to get at you. You're facing no evil energy, negative energy. Nothing's really getting thrown at you. So it lasts a couple of months. And that's good too. You know, that means you've protected yourself really well. You've kept yourself out of situations or away from people who might want to do you harm. And that's good, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So when you redo them, varies from person to person, from ward to ward. It just depends, you know? Go with your gut on that one, but it's good to have them done pretty frequently. Sometimes people ask, how do you know when you need a protection done, right? And there are a couple of different ways you can know when you need a protection done. And I'm going to list some of these ways, and all of these ways can coincide with different things, you know? So don't take this as, oh, if I'm feeling this way or if this thing happens, then for sure I need protection. It could be a couple of different things, but if you're feeling most of these things, if you're feeling like, oh, I have that, maybe think about doing some protections, right? Maybe think about, okay, maybe I need to revamp that. Maybe I need to rework that. Maybe I need to recharge and cleanse and ground, okay? So one of the first ways you can know that you need to do some protection is if you're feeling constantly watched. You know, if you feel like something's constantly there, something's constantly looking at you, you're like on edge all the time, that could be a way that you know you need to do your protections. If you are feeling suddenly cold, suddenly hot, and that, like I said, can coincide with a couple of different things. Sometimes it's just the air, sometimes it's just the temperature, but that combined with everything else could be a sign, right? If you feel heavy in your chest or pressure all the time, that for sure can be a sign. Um, if you're feeling super drained, super fatigued, just super exhausted, that's another sign. Having headaches, migraines, psychic blocks can also, if you're like, it, also if you're in a creative block, you know, that coincides with those psychic blocks where you're like, I'm not able to bring out ideas, I'm not able to think, I'm not able to do what I'm normally able to do. That could be a sign. Getting in lots of accidents, injuries, um, having lots of bad luck, running into things, uh, those types of things, being clumsy, breaking things, can also be a sign that you need to do protections, right? Sometimes it's not like big things, sometimes it's just small things where it's like, I've stubbed my toe like 7 times today, or I've stubbed my toe like every day this week. If a lot of bad things are happening very close to each other, you might want to think about doing some protection. You know, if you lose your job, uh, if you get out of a relationship, that could be a sign. Not having focus, not being able to think clearly, feeling despair or loss, you know, losing your sex drive. Those could also be some signs that you might need to be doing protection. If you suddenly fall ill, you know, if you're like someone who doesn't get ill a lot, if you're someone who doesn't get sick a lot, and then you suddenly become ill and it stays and it doesn't go away in a normal amount of time, you may think, maybe I need to do some protection, right? And that, if you have chronic illness, that one might not work for you, honestly, and that's okay. There, like I said, there are a lot of different ways to tell if you need protection. But if plants start dying around you, if you start seeing dead things around you in general, dead bugs, dead animals, dead plants, that could be a really big sign that you might need to be doing some protection. Okay? Feeling anxiety. I don't know if I said that one already, but feeling anxiety. And just in generally acting out of character. And when you act out of character, you yourself might not be aware that you're acting out of character. You might not be aware that you're doing something out of your norm, because in your head you're like, well, this is fine. This is cool. So you might need to have someone else talk to you and be like, you're acting strange lately. You're doing things that you don't normally do. And that's a really big sign that you need to be doing protection. That's like, okay, hey, we need to do some real magical workings here. We need to do some serious cleansing, some serious grounding, um, and we work the energy that's around us at this point in time, right? So those are some ways that you can know that you need protection. Um, and sometimes people think that there's just like one type of protection. There are a lot of different ways to protect, right? And there are a lot of different things to protect, as we've gotten into. Um, and so there are a couple of different categories. So when you're thinking about, okay, I want to do protection, think about exactly what you want to protect. Because, like I said, doing any type of working, it works to be as specific as possible, right? Do you want to do physical protection? And the best way to do physical protection is start with the mundane, right? Keep yourself out of physical harm, right? Don't go into dangerous places at night, you know? Uh, put your seatbelt on when you're driving. Stay away from people who are negative, right? Physically keep yourself out of those spaces. So there's a lot of ways you can do mundane physical protection that works great. It works perfect, okay? But you could also do spells to help with that physical protection. And there's nothing wrong with that. A little extra protection never hurt no one, right? And then we got mental protection. And mental protection helps with like anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, mentally unstable, focus, clarity, and just feeling like your life is falling apart, it helps with those types of things, okay? And it helps keep those things away, so that way they don't end up affecting your spell work or your practice or your spiritual well-being. And that's incredibly important, and sometimes people forget about that. You can also do emotional protection, right? um, and this works great if you're someone who's very sensitive to other people's emotions, right? If you're like, I just get so affected by other people's emotions, you really might want to think about doing some emotional protection, because then you're prone to feelings of sadness, despair, anger, rejection. All those feelings just get amplified so much more, and you can try and protect yourself from those feelings in general, where you like don't feel them at all. But at the end of the day, those emotions are important. They tell you things, they let you know things that are wrong. And so when you feel those things, you're like, okay, here's what I have to do to make sure I'm the best version of myself, to make sure I'm doing the things that I need to do to make myself happy, right? So I wouldn't exactly protect myself from those emotions. I would probably protect myself from, if I'm someone who's super sensitive to other people's emotions, I'd create a barrier so that way their feelings don't affect me in that way, you know? Or if I'm like, okay, right now in this moment, I need to be focused. I don't need to be feeling said feeling. I might try and protect myself from that feeling for a while. But at the end of the day, I know, hey, that's an important feeling. If I'm feeling it, I need to understand why I'm feeling it. So that way I can tackle the problem, so I can tackle the issue. And then we also have spiritual protection, which is the most common protection. That's when we protect against psychic attacks, the warding. We do the making sure my spiritual energy is okay. So that we hear a lot about that one. That's the most common type of protection when we think of protection, which is very important too. But all the other ones can be incredibly important also. Other types of protections that we may not be thinking about sometimes is warding. When you think of warding, think of like a barrier, like a protection bubble, and you or whatever you want to be is inside that bubble. That is what warding is, okay? And then there are different types of warding. You can have permanent types of warding where it's like this is there forever, like a salt circle. That's temporary. You eventually get rid of that. But like if you have a spell jar, that's kind of permanent. So you have your temporary wardings and your permanent ones. The temporary wardings works great for if you're doing spell work and you're like, this is just a warding for right here, right now, and eventually I'm going to get rid of it. Permanent wardings, those need to be maintained, upkept over time. So when we do warding, we have trapping, where you keep something in, right? So in your bubble, something stays in there, it's contained, it's there. Sometimes people contain negative energy. You'll see this a lot in the scary movies, right? They will take a evil doll, possessed doll, and they will stick it in a box container, and it's under a ward where that energy cannot get out. It's stayed in there. It's not going anywhere. So that's what we think of when we're thinking of trapping. You could also trap yourself, but I don't know why you would want to, because then you would be keeping yourself from also the good things. So not something that I would recommend. We have circumventing, and that is when we're inside our little bubble, right? Our protection bubble, and we kick out all of the negative. We kick out all the things we don't want, right? And we're still in our protection bubble. And then we have filtering, right? Filtering, I like the most because what it does is, yes, it's still kicking things out, but also you can choose to keep things in, right? When you do circumventing, it usually kicks everything out. It's like everything out, nothing's there anymore. Then you have to create the energy in there that you want. But if you're filtering, you're just kicking out specific energies that you don't want, and you can keep in love, kindness, peace, whatever. So I like the filtering wording the best. And then we have banishing. Banishing doesn't create a ring of protection, right? It just kicks something out. It's just like, okay, get out of here, be gone, but it doesn't create that ring of protection. In warding, there is that ring of protection. You're still protected the whole time, even after you've kicked it out. Banishing does not do that, but it's still good. Still very good. Especially if you already have your protection set up and you're like, my protections are good, my protections are solid. Somehow something slipped through. I just need to kick that thing out, right? I don't need to redo warding. I don't need to redo protections. I just need to kick said thing out, which is still good. And then we have binding. Binding, most people know binding in love spells because you keep something together. Two things stuck together. And so they're like, right, binding for love spells. You can also use binding for protection, right? You can tie someone to themselves to keep them away from you, in a sense. You know, you can tie someone to something else to keep them away from you. And so binding is a type of protection. A couple of ways you can do binding. People like to do freezer spells, stops them in their track. The thing about freezer spells is it pauses things. It puts things on hold. And eventually things have to start up again. You know, you're going to have to deal with that problem. There are jar spells, which is nice. You can weigh someone down, put a rock on their name, and it keeps them away from you. It like holds them in place type vibes. You could always use a poppet, which is always nice. I have recently gone into poppets. And then you can tie them up, you know, to tie them to themselves, to tie them to something else, to keep them away from you, like I said. So those are some of the different types of protections. Something that I've heard a lot about recently is protecting your name, which I think is a great idea, which I think is super smart, especially if you're someone who is making your presence known on the social media space, or even if you're not, even if you're just out there, you're a regular schmegular person. Protecting your name is smart, because at the end of the day, people are always going to speak about you, whether it be good, whether it be bad, whether you're aware of it, whether you're not. People are going to speak about you, you know. So it's just a smart idea to protect your name. One of the ways you can protect your name is you can set up a code word or a code phrase that whenever people are speaking about you badly, they will say this phrase so that you know they are speaking about you badly. And this is helpful in identifying who your enemies are, identifying who you can and cannot trust, you know, because sometimes you have people who are close to you who you're like, I thought I could trust them, I thought they were friends, and then you find out you couldn't. So if you're skeptical of the people who are around you, this is a great way to find out who you can trust and who you cannot. And you want to make sure that the word or phrase that you pick is something that's not common at all. You know, like purple bananas. You don't want something that someone could easily say, you know? Like ice cream. The chances that someone's going to say ice cream is pretty high. So it has to be something that's just out there that most people wouldn't think of. So that way when you hear it, you're like, that was completely random. That was completely out of the blue. I know for sure that you're speaking about me. And then you can either cut them off, you can limit what you tell this person, you can distance yourself from this person so that way you can protect yourself. You can also protect your name in the senses you can set up a spell to where if someone says your name, something bad happens to you, well, to them. And that's not one that I would really recommend, just because not everyone who speaks negatively about you deserves your time and energy, right? It's not worth it, honestly. You can do this, not something I'd recommend to just for protecting your name. And then there's the protecting your name where when someone speaks about you, good or bad, you can turn that energy into something else, like abundance, like happiness, like joy. And that, I think, would be the best, because it's turning their negativity into something positive for you. You know, so at the end of the day, you're still benefiting, no matter what. And that is something that I really like, and that is something that I do recommend. And something that sometimes people don't think about is you can protect more than just your legal name. You can protect your witch name, you can protect your nickname, you can protect your social media names, right? And I have done this. I've set wards against my social media handles, so that way it's under the same thing, right? I've set words against my social media handles so that way when someone tries to steal my content, when someone tries to steal what is mine, something negative happens to them, right? And that's a word in itself. And that's a way to protect yourself as well. So these are just the different types of protections that are out there. If you're thinking about protection, if you want to know more about protection, if you're like I wasn't 100% sure how protection worked or how to do it, that is how you can do it. For just a regular protection, what I like to do is I like to get a black candle and I will carve what I want to happen into that candle, or you could write it down on a piece of paper. That works perfectly fine too. And for herbs, I like to use salt, salt, black pepper, and really, if you have those things, you're solid. You're good. You don't even need the black salt. You could use salt, black pepper, and if you want to, you could also use chili flakes, right? And you set that around the candle, light the candle, say your intentions, boom, protection. Doesn't have to be hard. You can even just use the black candle, right? Carve what you want into the candle, and that's perfectly fine too. It doesn't have to be the most elaborate or sophisticated thing in the world, honestly. And if you're wanting to know how to protect your name, what I would say is I would write down your name 3 times on a piece of paper. And I would say what you want to happen around your name, like write it around your name, whether it be like, okay, whenever someone speaks so and so about me, I get abundance, write that around your name, right? Get a black or white candle, either one. I like black because this is protection, and light it. Set it on fire, right? Set the candle on fire, set the paper on fire, say what you want into the candle. And that is how you can protect your name. And so those are some of the simplest things that I can think of for you guys, so that way it doesn't have to be super hard. And you can start getting into magic if you want to.